with AI, it was interesting because everybody said like, but now I can do all these things myself. That was the first reaction, kind of, I can do this solo, the solopreneur, I need less people on kind of my company to do certain things. And that kind of scared a lot of people. But what we now see is indeed the agents thrive if it would give it the right context and the right information. And to do that, we actually have to have a consensus, not only between the human and the agent, but the agent is actually forcing us to talk to other colleagues to have the same context. And so while the agent is almost like failing at things, let's discuss that. Like, how can we help the agent? It's almost like agent enablement, but kind of developer enablement. Saying like, we're all gonna end up solo, kind of coding with our brain. We're not, like, it's not happening.
Right, it's still gonna take that cross collaboration. I'm Nathaniel Barnes, Portfolio CTO at HG. And my guest today coined a term that became the way an entire industry works. In 2009, Patrick Debois was a frustrated Belgian consultant on a government data center migration, watching developers and operations team talk past each other. His response was to organize a small conference in Ghent called DevOps Days. That conference became a global movement. The term Patrick coined, DevOps, reshaped how software gets built and shipped. Patrick co-authored the DevOps Handbook. Over the 17 years since, he's watched version control, code review, CI/CD pipelines, and observability go from fringe practices to baseline hygiene. Now he's watching it happen again. But this time, the thing that needs the rigor isn't code, it's context. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. So, you talked a little bit in your talk earlier about the parallels that you draw over time, and talked about what if ops was like dev in 2009. And now in 2026, we're starting to ask, what if context was like code? What made that first leap a step change? How did you know it was happening? And how do you draw that parallel out to today?
Yeah, so the it was already mentioned in the industry. You get a little bit frustrated, right?
Yeah.
And I'm an engineer, so I like to then do things a little more structural and kind of have some pride of the things that I do.
Yeah.
And with DevOps, that was kind of the whole pride about like, hey, I want to be proud at that time how I run the systems and how useful, how well it's performing to the customers. And then it frustrated me how we kind of hand off kind of the way we did at that time as well. And that kind of grew into, there must be a better way. And then I found other people kind of, coming into, hey, we're doing this, we're doing testing, we're doing kind of more canary deploys. And there's a whole set of practices. But then I always look also for, there's a lot of tooling that kind of overcomes a certain problem, and I kind of give it like a new direction. But then the tooling has a set of practices that kind of change the way you work. And so I'm interested in both, kind of like, making sure that like the change is actually also in the organization. And that kind of led to a transformation where some technology actually, some people stay at the technology level with containers, but that kind of is a fascinating field to be in. And now with AI, obviously the game changer was new technology, AI.
Yeah.
And people, especially now, maybe since more of a year in the coding field, which is near and dear to obviously the previous field of kind of building and delivering software, kind of caught on. And now we're looking what this practice could be. And that's kind of where led me to that similar thinking.
Do you see ways that we're grappling with the same kinds of problems as we move forward into the agentic coding, or that we're grappling with them in the same ways? You talked about that proliferation of tooling, and I know we see that everywhere right now in the same way that we did during the DevOps movement.
Well, there's two times I think the proliferation is happening. The first time is more in the emerging phase. Everybody wants to be the first, the killer, the one thing everybody uses. So there's a race going on, and you're seeing now the same thing. And whether that's your Anthropic, your OpenAI, kind of the big players, and then smaller players try to build on top of that new technology. Then at the more end of the phase, when things kind of transition more into organization, there's a proliferation of kind of vendors, because it's an established thing and they all want a piece of that like pie as well. So that is happening very similarly. We don't have a clear winner yet. What's fascinating is the speed now. Like the winner of today could be kind of obsolete within a year.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tough for the big player, but it's definitely happening with the former SaaS players as well. So.
Yeah, 100%. I know during DevOps, one of the things that drove the ability of that to create long-term transformation was essentially by codifying Conway's Law and breaking down those walls so that people could actually talk more effectively with each other. So we look forward. Are you seeing more instances of that as we go forward? Are you seeing things where the agents are basically accelerating people into these existing walls that they have in between their existing structures and teams? Or are you seeing people reshape and do something different in that regard?
Yeah, I think both kind of worked, starting a little bit from the solo person where, I can deploy a server and now I can deploy 100 consistently. So kind of that coding harness and people that are experimenting with those pieces as well. But scaling it out is, actually the collaboration, as you mentioned. Now, it was very centered in DevOps, DevOps in the word, of course. With AI, it was interesting because everybody said but now I can do all these things myself. That was the first reaction. Kind of, I can do this solo, the solopreneur. I need less people on kind of my company to do certain things. And that kind of scared a lot of people. But what we now see is indeed, we learned that actually the agents thrive if it would give it the right context and the right information. And to do that, we actually have to have a consensus, not only between the human and the agent, but the agent is actually forcing us to talk to other colleagues to have the same context.
Yeah.
So that's kind of helping as well. And so while the agent is almost like failing at things, let's discuss that. Like, how can we help the agent? It's almost like agent enablement, but kind of developer enablement.
Yeah.
But it helps that collaboration. Now, the other thing is also silos, and I mentioned that in my talk as well. There's people, within an organization, you have certain knowledge, others don't, and there's good reasons, permissions, and kind of scrutiny on those as well. But sometimes it is more like, well, that person doesn't want to talk to me, but I have access, but I have no clue what it's doing. And kind of AI, I can have it relentlessly able to follow up on my questions, and as long as I get the access to the data or kind of the context that person used, I can kind of help overcome those bridges where maybe somebody else doesn't have time. The other, maybe third piece that I say is that Dev and Ops blended together, and that was probably, at the beginning, the biggest friction that came. But then it was the testers, DevSecOps came. Yeah. And then it became like Biz, DevSecOps, HR, and all the things. I personally learned that whatever the parallels were on that pipeline that we're building technically was also there in the sales pipeline, in the GTM kind of pipeline. Sure. It's all about vetting, triaging, filtering, feedback loops, and going there as well. And we now see that with AI as well, where we kind of collaborate and do that as well. Now, AI is actually stimulating us and writing documentation, writing pieces. I mentioned that it's the first time in history that developers actually like to write documentation. Maybe they become a manager, but kind of their role is expanding. They become a manager, they become more of the architect of their system, they become more of the PM. So that cross-boundary person, and I think some call this the AI product engineer, they go broader.
Right.
That kind of multi-layered, faceted person also creates empathy for different roles. And that was also a part of DevOps where, if I know the pains that Ops is having as a dev, I'll do my best to kind of improve this if I know Ops, what Dev has. And so AI is also what a PM, discovery, that's a hard thing to have the right feature. Yeah. And so that's also helping in collaboration aspects. The PMs are building prototypes and they help engineering to build the right thing instead of frustrated documents that they ship around. So a lot of collaboration is happening. So I think the saying we're all going to end up solo, kind of coding with our brain, we're not. It's not happening.
Right. It's still going to take that cross collaboration.
Yeah.
I think it's funny you talked about that intersection and trying to have to get the right information, because I think as engineers, we've seen for so long that the biggest problem you get often is just getting an idea, getting the right idea down of what it is you actually want out of someone's head, and then into paper so that you can then actually do something with it. And so I think it's been fascinating watching that process play out at lightning speed with these agents accelerating everything.
Yeah. I have a fascinating example about, we often think about getting ideas inside our companies or maybe in our team. But what if we talk a lot about vibe coding and people building kind of prototypes. So, and part of the vibe coding is that learning journey. Like, what do I actually want to build? Because they can see it in action and it gives way better feedback. But what if your customers can actually build on top of you? What if you allow them to vibe code with APIs of your tools? You're going to see features they would never be able to describe, but all of a sudden you're like, you build what?
Right.
and kind of taking that outside world also into your product as you do the same thing as internally. I think they're both equally valid as learnings. So.
And doing it without having to build that mountain of tech debt that comes with like a DSL or something.
Yeah, resources are scarce, so you have to pick as a product manager what first, and hopefully you make the right bets, and that's the discovery already improving. We can build it faster. We can build multiple versions of that.
Yeah.
We can get so. There is definitely an accelerating happening in the industry.
Do you think that's a function of that the ideas get closer to what the market actually wants by that, or do you think that that's more a function of we're looking for the best idea in a haystack, and so if we make the haystack bigger because everybody can try their idea, that they're finding the right one?
I think it's more of we never had time for all the exceptions and things that we thought were useful, but we couldn't build due to the scarce resources. It's not about obviously there's a discovery of the right feature that will make money ultimately.
Sure.
But the adaptability is also a phase that can create more money, because that one addition all of a sudden makes your feature unlock a whole new product group as well. So I think it goes both ways, that perspective.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So for our listening audience, I see when I get outside of people who are having to deal with these things on a kind of day-to-day basis that there's a bit of confusion as to what exactly is the difference between, say, context engineering and prompt engineering, or what makes context in this specific way different. Could you start with just a brief explanation on that?
Sure. Yeah. I think most people, even if they're not like engineers, they use ChatGPT. So whatever they type in the chat window, you would consider those kind of prompts, right? Like one by one that we do that. Now, the kind of technology you're applying is the LLM, and they have a limited amount of text they can almost keep in their memory when they reply to you.
Sure.
And context engineering as a field has been quite focused on, we have that limitation, so whatever we put in there has to count. And that's kind of what context engineering meant from prompt engineering. Like you're almost like managing the window, what goes in to the LLM. Now, what I'm talking about is the context development lifecycle. So before you put it into your agent and that window, you got to prepare and find all that information. And it needs to be right. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be the right pieces. And so that kind of looking and managing that context before it goes into the context window, becomes context engineering, that gets translated into prompts. That's kind of the life cycle that I think we're at. And we're seeing that code is becoming more prompting. We also see that pieces of our code is being replaced by actually prompts, more complex things like onboarding or user support or stuff like that. And we just need a better way of kind of dealing with that. And right now, a lot of people just copy and paste documents. And that's kind of like, again, my engineering head goes like, what?
Oh, no.
No, we shouldn't be doing this. Like, there has to be a better way.
Yeah.
And then in analogy with the software development lifecycle, kind of that's the context development lifecycle.
And so your context development lifecycle you were talking about earlier, it's you've broken it into 4 steps: generate, evaluate, distribute, and observe. Can you walk us through that, and what do teams frequently struggle with as they kind of get through that process, and where do you think you have to get it right?
Yeah, I think everybody has a different journey, of course, but in general, a lot of people are very focused on creating context. They type prompts, maybe they write files, and then they copy and paste the file as a prompt, and kind of that. There's a lot of creation, Maybe that's from your internal wiki, your Slack system. So that's kind of the first phase, and I call that generate, create, kind of like, you manage that.
Which is the part everybody's focused on when we're
Yeah,
talking about
right now.
Cloud Code and
Yeah,
DevOps
indeed.
and tools
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
It's all generation.
Yeah. And then what you saw increasingly happen is while you're doing it as a solo person, but I also want to use this. And then you start the first kind of version of distribute. Well, I have this awesome prompt. Can I copy and paste this? That's kind of maybe the first version of distribute. Or I check this into my version control, maybe in some files, and I get that. And now you see a whole piece of marketplaces that you start seeing pop up where it's similar to a shared library. Mm-hmm. It's a shared context piece and a package that I can download from my agent. So instead of having to write everything myself, I can just download it. If I use another tool, somebody else is using it. Similar to libraries and open source libraries, or kind of as a concept. Now that's usually the cycle that people go to. The third piece is they give it to somebody else, and then they say, well, it doesn't work. I have no clue why it works, or when it will work, or what they change. There comes a new model, they don't know whether it's better or not. They add 15 lines. Is it now kind of remembering the things? Is it forgetting all the things? They become too long. So that's usually when people go into, I need a way to test this better than a vibe check. Is this, yeah, seems good to me, let's ship it. No, you can't do this in engineering like that. And so conceptually, the AI world has the idea of evals. So they run a bunch of tests. So I give, let's say, an agent a task, and then the funny part is I can also have an agent check whether the task was completed in a good way. So a lot of people call this LLM as a judge, or kind of evaluations. Yep. And so whenever I change something in my context, I say, here's a piece of context, here's my agent, here's my problem, try to establish this, and then I have another agent judging whether it was established. So you can create a set of criteria, a set of tests, a set of scenarios, so it becomes very close to behavior-driven development. I have a scenario, I want to test this. So everything comes back, right? Like engineering rigor is now kind of coming back into those phases.
What is old is new again.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I think the fourth piece was about, well, we got the testing, but usually devs kind of like do this locally in a cycle. Like I got a piece of context, I wrote my lines of agentMD, I see whether it works, maybe I can test it on multiple agents, I have a nice framework to do this. I distribute this, but then how do I automate the feedback?
Yeah.
And so you have observability for production machines. So what if we look at the log files from everybody in the organization using that context? Can we find missing context? Can we find like conflicting context? Can we see whether something is added to the context? And so you start getting that feedback mechanism that was instrumental to CI/CD, but now for context, like we're feeding this back, and somebody adds that all new piece of context that everybody's struggling with, or the agents were struggling with, and all of a sudden everybody becomes more productive. So you get the same kind of infinity loop as you would get with kind of CI/CD to kind of improve that lifecycle.
Awesome. I was a big fan when I was a line engineer of test-driven development in general, and one of the things that was an eye-opener for me as I was adopting DevOps myself was the concept of testing loops inside of testing loops inside of testing loops, and so this is making my code better. The TDD was making my code better, and then I had broader ones that would make sure I didn't break anything too terrible, and then I had broader ones as we got into the build. As we move into kind of an AI world, do you see a place for or a structure of loops like that where we have different testing that runs locally as you're doing it, and different testing that's going to run as you get broader than that, and different testing on the distribution level and that kind of thing, where you're kind of continually improving?
Yeah, I often refer to it almost like a sonar, right? Like I test like with a ping, and then always go farther. Yeah. Like whether it's still kind of having contact. So, if you look at context, sometimes like a skill, it has formatting. It's almost like a linter. Yep. That's a very fast thing that you can run locally. Maybe I can run a series of kind of those LLM as a judge locally on my machine.
Sure.
but I won't be able to run it across different agents. Maybe for that, I need like a server or a CI/CD server to do that.
Build environment.
Yeah. Now, the judges also have different levels. I can judge it just by the output. Hey, it produced code, it's looking good, almost like you read it on paper, but you never executed it.
Right.
But when you execute it, it becomes almost like, okay, this is an actual test, so it's not like that fast test it's going to execute. It could still be relatively fast, but then maybe I want to test it with all the tools, like a setup that every coding person has. And all of a sudden, that becomes like an end-to-end test. It needs access to all the systems.
Right.
It needs access to all the things. So that kind of same thing is happening. And so the more complex and closer almost to production environment you get, probably the things that you can shift into kind of like more complex cloud systems. Now, the coding agents are also moving to the cloud. So the jury's still out whether devs will actually still want to keep running things on their laptop. It's another thing that we've tried for years to standardize kind of people coding's environment, but there's a personality to it apparently that is hindering us.
We went through that whole process to containerize everything, and then ended up with developers just running the container sitting on their laptop so that they could have it locally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I doubt whether that but maybe like one of the pitfalls is that some people try to run local models to get faster feedback, but I think that's a step too far. In a way that, on maybe feedback on your domain, if it's useful feedback, then that works. But you can't know from one model on your laptop whether that behaves the same way as an agent that is running the cloud from a vendor. So that's, again, like almost like local testing with a non-conformant test environment similar to production. But kind of that is... A lot of people struggle, like, should I run the LLM locally? And it's like, do you really want to waste time for that right now? So, I don't know.
Do you see a world where we start getting observability from production and feeding it into those kind of local evals in that way? I know that's an area that we've tried to push in that direction. I feel like every time that we as an industry get close to that, we actually find ourselves farther away, with the exception of a few things around like search goodness scores and things like that. But I wonder, in this world where we have LLMs that can, act as the judge, and they can know something about your system as they're just raking over it, if they could also rake over the observability and take that live information and then feed it back into your test system as it's running.
Yeah. I think the question is similar to, do I actually need tests? Right. So it's you learn either by the test you can come up with or your customers come up with. And that kind of is like, that is your observability. Like that's the things that you didn't anticipate, or maybe like you want to know that what's happening. Now I think it's a maturity thing that like whenever something goes wrong into production, you take that to heart and you actually improve that in your evals. Like you take an agent trace and then you say, this is now a test case. Did I improve my context? And does the agent now behave in the right way? So that's kind of a good practice. Now, not everybody is doing this, and it's a step-by-step thing. Maybe not. You don't have the observability yet in your agent. Generally, in the industry, it's not that well formed, and it is just, funny enough, I think it's still because in organization, they're still so siloed, even though they're not telling it, but like production is run by platform team right now. I'm not like ops, but it's not the same thing. Now, the tools are working on exposing that information more and more, and then kind of it becomes more accessible to the agents of the devs as well.
Right.
But I've gone through numerous conferences and I talked to the dev vendors like, hey, shouldn't you put in more of the operationals? Like, yeah, but nobody's asking for it. And the ops says like, nobody's asking for the dev. And it's like, really? Like, that's because you're still thinking within your domain as an organization.
There has to be a world where now, instead of us trolling those logs to write test cases to then like pull back in there that the LLM
totally
is
be
trolling
done
logs.
Technically.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping us, but if everything is DIY, we don't want to do that either. So
that's fair.
Vendor, if you're listening, there's an opportunity in the market.
Now we're just giving ideas away for free on the podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. You referred to the context development lifecycle as a flywheel during your talk. So that would imply there's a compounding effect to that like as you get better, you continue to pay increasing dividends. Could you talk through kind of how that works? Like how does it feed in and actually accelerate the life cycle going forward?
Yeah. If you start with a solo developer improving parts of the documentation because they weren't right or the wiki wasn't right, and they're kind of overriding this into their own file. What if all of a sudden the whole team gets that update, right?
Yep.
Then their agents start performing better as well. And now the team might only know the domain knowledge of that specific piece of the product they're working on, but might not know anything on the actual guidelines for production.
Yeah.
Or security guidelines. So that team can write it. So all of a sudden, instead of them nagging, hey, did you improve security? Are you following our run books? All those pieces, that kind of gets used by the agents as well. So it's like real life execution of the run books of the context.
Yeah.
And then with the observability we talked about, that gives you your feedback channel, whether that's still working. Now, if one person then improves this, all of a sudden, you can kind of push out that context to all the coding agents, and all of a sudden they get an upgrade. Not from the model, not from the engine, but from the context. It could be useful for new product terminology. All of a sudden, like everybody's like working around this.
Yeah.
So even product teams could start writing those contexts. Because then the agents get less confused. Was it now the old product, the new product?
Yeah.
And those have just a compounding effect, and I hate to say compounding, but it's good for the AI. Every AI says compounding.
We'll give it some more things to train on there.
Yeah. That's perfect. But that's kind of the flywheel that I think is happening, hopefully in organizations that take this seriously.
Do you think that expands outside of R&D as well? So, you get this compounding effect where we're feeding new information about what the agent did well or didn't do well into the context that then gets distributed among the developers. Do you get the same feedback loop where, say, every product person who's having an interview with a customer and gaining knowledge about what the market actually needs is then taking that and distributing it out as well to every other product person who's doing research or trying the same things?
I think you nailed it. Yeah, it's exactly that. There's nothing specifically to that. Similar to I said, like the DevOps principles for collaboration across silos is also universal in the company.
Yeah.
Context is also across the whole company. Now, one of the things that, this sounds like too good to be true, and there is friction.
Sure.
I'm not gonna say it. Like, context can get outdated, but the fact that it's actively used is probably the best defense on it being corrected.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just gets easily stale. We do get into politics a little bit.
Sure.
Who gets to say what goes in, what's the rule? But hey, that's like organizational hierarchy, and that's a little bit hard. The kind of conflicts, how do you handle conflicts of context is another one. Like, it's like the owner gets to decide, but there's specifically overriding cases of context, so we need a mechanism for that as well. And then just by, the product can drift, the technical things can drift, but I think the best bet is that maybe our agents are using it. And it's the same with guidelines. The guidelines that are never used are just that pay to bear in that as well. So.
Can you expand a little bit then on about that context drift and what happens there? What is it that you're referring to, and how does that change over time?
So a context drift would be something like let's say we use a tool for testing, and the tool has very specific ways of setting things up, or naming conventions, or processes that it needs to follow. We add a new tool to this, and that new tool kind of has another way of working.
Yeah.
But somewhere in the context, we still refer to the old ways of working.
Yeah.
So it's kind of drifting away. So that's one way. I already mentioned product. Today has the term blah, and tomorrow it says like hello as the product name. Good luck. Like, it's drifting away, and so that kind of, it's not a right once and done.
Right.
On the context. And it could be other way. The way we think about the problem, the way we think about our domain has changed, the way our customers change things. So that means we have to update a lot of context if one thing gets changed. But now, maybe with AI, and the problem and the solution is always AI, it's kind of like, keeping this up to date and flagging this. But it doesn't solve the thing of us having to put the effort of saying yes, no, or this is correct or not correct.
Yeah.
Luckily for that, we still have our job.
Yeah. I liked it in there where you said AI was turtles all the way down. It's just AI on AI, no matter where you look.
It is.
It's absolutely crazy. Do you think that the management and curation of this context is a internal product? Do you think that's something that eventually lives with a vendor or something like that? I know the context itself, that has to be like your organization's understanding, because it's part of the secret sauce of what makes you effective.
Yep.
But the actual like curation and management of it, where do you think that lands?
I think there's bound to be a set of products that will kind of make that easier.
Yeah.
There's already registries, there's all a bit of kind of the surfacing of conflicts and all. Those are like further down the line. But I think we're running a little bit behind on products. We already have like PRDs, management systems, collaboration forums, but it just didn't hit yet on coding context yet. But eventually it will come with like a shared platform integrated somewhere in a tool, whether you build that yourself. Probably your best bet right now a little bit. It's kind of the innovation tax that I call it. Like you have to pay the innovation tax in kind of these times of industry. But the feeding is obviously your business, and it's kind of like hopefully going to stay your moat while doing this.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be waiting for those products to exist.
No.
Instead, if you really want that flywheel to spin and get those compounding benefits, you've got to actually, resolve those differences between your organizations and get a single view now.
Yeah. And it might like prove organizational kind of like not being ready for this kind of arguments, or kind of like, but similar to that, like was DevOps transformation? You needed to have a certain way of thinking. Did the thinking change? Did the hierarchy change?
Yeah.
And that we're back to Conway's Law.
We just made the whole circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, I think there's so much of organizational change though that is just that forcing hard conversations in between them. I remember a lot of our early DevOps conversations were around that hard thing of like, well, why do we do that way? This is really inconvenient for dev, and because you created these problems that later I found in production kind of thing. And so it would not surprise me if we find later that it's product management that's arguing with marketing, but you keep putting this term in here and we A/B tested that or something else.
Guess what? The agents are also arguing. So
yeah. That's been really fun to watch actually. That may have been one of my favorite things about Maltbook when that came out, was watching the agents argue with each other. There was a particular thread I saw on Maltbook that was really funny where one agent had posted asking about translating. They had been given a receipt that was in Japanese and they were asking about how best to translate it. And there were 3 other agents arguing about the best way to translate this receipt in Japanese.
Yeah, sounds like an organization.
It's absolutely true. So with all of this compounding, that inevitably means there's a serious kind of acceleration that's happening inside of these companies. When I look at DevOps, you coined that term in 2009. I remember, my first time spinning up fully automated pipelines in probably 2011. It took a while for that to really cement in the industry, to the point that, like, even now, sometimes when we go look and do diligence on companies, I still see companies that have manual run books and manual build plans. But it feels like this is different. Like this is moving a lot faster. Do you see that? Do you see companies having to adjust kind of on the fly? Do you think that this will move that quickly, or do you think this is something that's going to play out over that kind of long term?
So I would differentiate between 2 things. Like I guess that we feel that the innovation is fast.
Yeah.
But I would say maybe it's not that faster than other times. But what gets the innovation faster is that it's more almost like public and has like a world audience instantly.
Yeah.
Which at that time, like social networks were kind of like, emerging, and Twitter had been like very instrumental for DevOps to kind of like find the like-minded people.
Yeah.
Now everybody's watching the whole show all the time.
Yeah.
So the innovation is, they get feedback so close and so fast for their innovation that probably that cycle is way faster. Now, we are in a transient phase.
Yeah.
And early adopters always want to be on the competitive edge, but maybe they don't need to be, right?
Yeah.
A late adopter could be fine. They skip the whole thing and say like, whatever, we're still making money, and then we go in. It depends a little bit on your industry to go there as well. I still get questions about people say, we just discovered DevOps. How is that possible in an industry where all the knowledge is available?
Yeah.
Same thing, we're discovering evals, age, and context. Conceptually, technology-wise, it has been there for a couple of years.
Sure.
So that's kind of also weird. There's like, the industry needs to massage itself, and sometimes, I sometimes think it's drip feeding us.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think for the longest time we've had this conversation around, well, like all the knowledge is out there. Why don't you have it? I think what I grapple with here is the fact that, because of that nature of its compounding benefits, it usually forces you to have to do something differently. So, you look back at the last time that I can remember that for sure that we have seen an exponential curve like this in growth of knowledge and capability is like Moore's Law. Yeah. And so, there were companies that were able to sit out the semiconductor revolution, if you will. But those companies were not people that made things with technology in them. And many of those companies died along the way.
Yeah.
So it becomes one of those, you have to kind of get on as it accelerates in that way. It's that it's a very different thing for the knowledge to be out there and then to have to grapple in a market where somebody is getting
right? Make it
exponentially faster.
And I think we're at the age that it doesn't need to be perfect. We just need to be there.
We just need to do it.
Yeah, we just need to do it. And that's also a little bit weird as the engineer, not perfect. It's always been a balance, but right now we're seeing GitHub going down more, people complaining about that, and kind of, we're making progress, but there's a balance to be made there.
It is funny because when we look across our portfolio and when I look at the broader industry, a lot of times the companies that spent the biggest time trumpeting I have my 27-step plan for how I'm going to roll out AI in my code, those are the ones that a year later I'm looking back and they're still on step 14 of their 27-step plan, whereas the ones that came in, attacked a problem, the bottleneck moved, something else broke somewhere else, but then they just, okay, great, we'll attack that one, we'll kind of, be agile in that way. Those are the ones that actually made the big benefits.
It is a paradox, and I have that personally myself, in that you work with teams that haven't been as long in the industry. That's not hard. But you've accumulated all these kind of battle scars, and things like, hey, we need to watch out for this, we need to watch out for that. So you don't want to be the person that's kind of like the grandfather who says hey, we did all these things. You want them to move at the speed they want to, and they stumble through. I think the thing is, much like a toddler, how they learn, is you provide a safe environment. So that's, I think the downside is you need to have, there's often not anymore the time of the longer horizon or the hypothesizing of what could be your future. Yeah. Because, you be in the weeds, you need to deliver. But that's kind of all the way, that's another kind of tension that existed in companies for a long time, right? Futuristic thinking versus kind of like day-to-day business.
It's almost like you need somebody who's going in and crashing into things and trying the new things and stumbling, as you said, like a toddler. But on the same note, you have to have that bag of tricks that we've been slowly accumulating with our battle scars for the last 100 years.
And what is still relevant, right? Because that's the same as the context pruning. It's like your own kind of knowledge pruning. I need to throw all that away. Technology's moved on. It's working different in the industry. And that's also maybe the paradox, is that a lot of people think our lives is just going to be easier. But maybe we're just shifting complexity. Yeah. Our judges now also have to have a prompt that we need to maintain. Our context drift is a new problem. So are we gaining? But it depends on where we want to put the emphasis on kind of the speed. Yeah. And right now, the speed is the agility, and not kind of the robustness, and that's I guess choices that we make there. So
I think in many ways, though, that sometimes people learn techniques, but not the first principles that kind of brought them to why that technique came to bear. And, we exist in an industry where there are no panaceas. There's nothing that is a universal good all of the time. And so helping people learn the whys and the hows then helps them to understand when they should be applying that technique or not. Because you're right, there's so much that has to be pruned as we continue to evolve and grow.
Do you ever try to, kind of teach children the first principles? It doesn't go well in the beginning, right?
They don't enjoy that part so much.
No. So
But you go back and learn them after a few battle scars.
that's it. Yeah.
That's fair. As you're watching companies kind of grow, what are first indications to you that you think they're doing it wrong? Or maybe a better way to put that is like if you're looking at companies and you see somebody who's like, you see some that are sprinting ahead and that's great, and you see some that are starting to lag behind. Like, what's the first indication as you're looking at a company that they have that they're going to lag behind? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a touchstone of what they're doing wrong? What is it?
It sounds weird, but when I would look how they treat their CI/CD, how mature they are there, they stand a better chance at like absorbing another transformation.
Okay.
So it's like if you're still like, okay, we're putting things on. That's it. A startup that skips the whole CI/CD and puts things in production, there's also worth to it because get and the customer feedback and no customers and no product. That goes there as well.
That goes back to that, when do you apply these individual principles? If I don't have a customer base, then I don't really care about that rigidity yet.
Evals is a little bit of a telltale sign. Like, are you doing some testing? Are you thinking about doing some testing? One of the challenges there is that the ownership of this piece has been confusing. Is it the devs? Is it the platform team? Or is it the AI team?
Yeah.
And the AI team can run beautiful eval systems, but they couldn't tell whether it was actually good code.
Yeah.
And so that's also kind of one of the signs, like who kind of owns that piece. And when I hear it's the AI team, they're going to worry about more on, is it AI that's kind of trainable and ML?
Right.
And it's like, we've moved on. Like that has its merit for certain pieces, but kind of did you kind of make the shift to Gen AI? And that reinvention is hard in companies.
Yeah, it reminds me one of my telltale ones when I'm looking at tech diligence of a company is often if I walk in there and I ask them ask a dev who's in charge of how your servers run on production. They're like, oh, there's a DevOps team over there. They take care of that. I'm like, oh God, no, you didn't figure that out. So,
although I'm not that adamant as people say. I love collaboration, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But, a mobile team is also something, right? Does everybody know is responsible for having it work on mobile? Yes, but there's a mobile team. It is a feature. So I tend not to say you can have definitely a DevOps team in a way, but I think it's about the mindset that team has.
Yeah.
Are we just offering the platform? Or are we actually enabling and listening to that? And that was a whole discussion about product as a platform, or the platform as a product, sorry. Are we listening to users? Are we doing and helping them with their business cases?
Yeah.
And so the silo is not about the naming of kind of like, oh, we have a team. It's like, how much are you kind of like, are they open to listening when you have a problem? How much are they helping you to overcome your problems?
Right.
And that's more of a telltale sign for me on that perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. To me, the problem is not necessarily that they have a DevOps team. It's that the answer is, oh, well, they deal with it. Then you've just created a silo.
But feature-driven teams, they're all kind of silos on hindsight, right? So it's like,
That's all we're doing over there.
No, I think that's another piece on, like, when you have autonomous teams, that's maybe a side tangent, but when it is not about like them being solo.
Sure.
It is about when they change something, they need to tell that to everybody in the company.
Yeah.
And so you still need to communicate, but you are have autonomy on making certain decisions. But then the whole system needs to be aligned on like, if I make a decision, you're not impacting, or the cost, you bear the cost if nobody else is doing it that way. So kind of there are choices in kind of that, like independency. So.
You have ownership of it, but you're also responsible for the outcomes of it.
Yeah. And then it's like the devs are running like agents as hell, and then the VP says like, look at my budget. So yeah, there's always like somebody who draws the short straw.
100%. As we're looking to the future, 2 years, let's just go 2 years from now, because I don't think I can contemplate what the world would look like in 5 to 10. What do you think a company looks like that is doing this well?
Oh, it's the crystal ball question, right?
That's right.
I would for me, the extension to context is actually knowledge. Haven't been that distilled in my mind, but the ones that actually are not just centralizing context, but are learning from what it's doing. And that's, again, bring that mode. And it's the same thing, like I have a DevOps platform and you just run it, it's a bunch of things, or it's actually listening to what the market is doing. And that reinvention, so if a company can absorb a new technology, let's say in a month, I hope that we're getting better at this as well. So is that where I predict that people will go? No, it's where I hope that people will go.
Yeah.
So that's kind of always a different thing. So
yeah. So if there was predictive power in DevOps from, say, cycle time, the
Yeah.
time from our commit to the time it's on production, is that then that the predictive power comes in our ability to absorb that context and then to productionize it?
correct. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. With this kind of rapid pace of change, I think it's there are some people that just like absolutely thrive on this, and then I certainly know some developers that are brilliant developers, and they're managing 12 agents at once, and they talk about the fact that as soon as it's done, they're like, oh my god, I'm mentally taxed, like I've got nothing left.
Yep.
How do you think what differentiates those two personality profiles, if you will? How can leaders inspire people to be more, or to thrive more on that kind of change, or maybe just prepare them for that kind of change?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a personality in general. Like,
Sure.
do you want to learn new things all the time, and is that where you thrive on? It's definitely my personality. Like I wanted to so I having the time of my life right now.
Yeah.
But some people I totally understand. They want to be like focused, stay very good at what they do. Now they don't need to be completely have the feeling that they're left out.
Yeah.
Right now we're in that transient phase, but it's hard to get synthesis of those kind of phases. So anything almost like leadership can tell them like, okay, this is what's happening in the industry. These are the things. They kind of keep people up to date, but they're not like, okay, you have to try this latest thing ever,
Yeah.
because that's kind of creating like a good thing on like trying, but it's not for everybody. So I think it's mostly for them to recognize that not everybody's interested in that chaos phase right now.
Yeah.
There is the choice about, is this the way that I like to continue my job? Babysitting servers was before DevOps, giving them names if that was what I wanted to do, and kind of have tune all kernels. Job has changed, right? I need to talk to customers. I need to talk to my teams.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge, whether you want to kind of have people move that direction. I don't think with transformation you can force people to kind of a direction, but for example, the people who have the battle scars, who've done these things before, I think they're great champions on writing context. Now, it might not be the life that they want, so that's up to them, but kind of look at opportunity. Maybe they're a great AI product engineer because they can think and still are important and have some engineering skills. So kind of looking where they fit in. But again, like any transformation, see where kind of the people look in, but it's not about having to be up to date all the time. And I think the other piece is, we love to say, here's the new technology, can you try it? Please respect things like, don't expect people to have a new prototype in the morning and then kind of scrutinize it. And it's like, when are you shipping this? Again, I get the tension, but there's also kind of like, pro and con. So leave some room for improvement there as well. The other thing is more of a personal hygiene. remember when the phone came out, social media came out, we're all like doom scrolling. Some people are still.
Sure.
But like, when's the moment you do this? When is the time that you close your laptop?
Right.
And Claude is not kind of giving you another idea to execute.
Yeah.
People will start living with the tension. And I guess it's also, there's going to be a little bit more guidelines in general. Okay, we're expecting you to kind of do this or
Sure.
limit the time you spend on that.
In some ways, your statement around needing slack or needing ability in there, it just reminds me of that, of the old adages around, a supply chain. If you have a supply chain that's highly efficient, it can't also absorb change rapidly. So you have to have slack in the system in order for a supply chain to function correctly. And I think that we're finding in many ways that in our R&D organizations and in the organization as a whole, that you have to have that kind of slack built into the system as well if you're going to be absorbing this kind of constant.
With that agility that we're talked about, you
Right.
definitely need that because you can't, and deliver production all the time and solve all the
Keep it hard
problems
forever.
to do that. But it's very enticing to look at just throughput. Or can we get more throughput?
How do I get that now?
There's ways of kind of looking at it by saying I have 2x, 3x. It still feels like hard to measure at times. Like maybe
Sure.
some bug rates and so on. I sometimes refer to it. There's the Infinity X, things you would never have done.
Yeah.
That's hard to beat.
Yeah.
So kind of look at those things, like what would you never have done as well, and that takes you on a new adventure typically. So
I always wonder sometimes whenever we get to the 2-3x conversation, if we're just like digging ourselves a bigger hole. There's that concept around the build trap, and so I wonder sometimes if we're just digging deeper build traps. Yeah.
It's fascinating because we keep learning and now we can build the ideas out and share. So it's But the learning is instrumental, I think, and leaving time to learn is important.
Yeah, finding that time for not only for you to learn from what's happening and changing in the industry, but from each other within the organization in order to build that shared context.
Yeah, correct. Context, you named it.
That's right. Brought it all back. Thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast, and thank you again for speaking here today at HG's Digital Summit. I know we've already gotten great feedback from the CTOs, CPOs, CISOs, and other technology leaders inside of the portfolio.
Well, my pleasure, and I'm keen to see what comes out of that. For those interested, I'm also running my own kind of event together with a community, of course, not my own, but it's called AI Native Dev Con. It's now in London, the 1st and 2nd of June. So you can join me there. Hey, Patrick 50 as a discount code. How does that sound for you, right? But it's more about like context, people struggling, learning from the industry as a community, similar to what I kind of DevOps Days was.
Yep.
So encourage you to come there. And if you have any questions, I'm easy to reach on the socials. And thanks again.
Definitely. I know we'll have people there. So thank you, Ian.
If you'd like to find out more about HG and our work building enduring enterprises, subscribe to our newsletter at htcapital.com/newsletters.